Husband left me for my younger sister. Their relationship crashed, and now they both want my forgiveness and to move into my guest house. I, 38F, never thought I'd be writing this post, but here I am, seeking advice from internet strangers because I honestly don't know what to do anymore. 5 years ago, my life was what most would call perfect. I had a successful career as a software engineer, a beautiful home in the suburbs, and what I thought was a loving marriage to my college sweetheart, Jake, 40M. We'd been together for 15 years, married for 10, and while we didn't have kids, by choice, we had 2 adorable golden retrievers that were our fur babies. Enter my younger sister, Mia, 30F. She'd always been the wild child of the family, bouncing from job to job, relationship to relationship. When she lost her apartment due to inability to pay rent, I convinced Jake that we should let her stay in our guest house for a few months until she got back on her feet. Looking back, I realize how naive I was. At first, everything seemed fine. Mia was grateful, helped around the house, and even started looking for a steady job. Jake and I would often invite her over for dinner, movie nights, or just to hang out. I was happy to have my sister close and to be able to help her. About 3 months into Mia's stay, I started noticing changes in Jake. He became distant, spent more time working late at the office, and was constantly on his phone. I brushed it off as stress from work, but deep down, I knew something was off. Then came the day that shattered my world. I came home early from a business trip, hoping to surprise Jake. Instead, I was the one who got the surprise of a lifetime. I walked in on Jake and Mia in our bed. The bed we'd shared for a decade. The betrayal cut deep, not just from my husband, but from my own flesh and blood. What followed was a blur of tears, screaming, and heartbreak. Jake confessed that he and Mia had been having an affair for weeks. He said he'd fallen in love with her and wanted a divorce. Mia, through tears, claimed she never meant for it to happen, but she couldn't help her feelings. I was devastated. In the span of a few hours, I'd lost my husband and my sister. I kicked them both out that day, filed for divorce, and cut all contact with Mia. The next year was the hardest of my life. I threw myself into work, spent countless hours in therapy, and leaned heavily on my friends and the rest of my family, who were equally shocked and supportive. Slowly but surely, I started to rebuild my life. I got promoted at work, redecorated the house to remove all traces of Jake, and even started dating again. I wasn't ready for anything serious, but it felt good to know that I could still connect with people. Now, here's where things get complicated. About a month ago, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was Jake. He sounded desperate and asked if we could meet to talk. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him for coffee. Jake looked terrible. He'd lost weight, had dark circles under his eyes, and seemed genuinely distressed. He poured out a story that, under different circumstances, might have been satisfying to hear. Apparently, his relationship with Mia had been a disaster from the start. Once the excitement of their affair wore off, they realized they had little in common. They fought constantly, mostly about money. Jake had to pay me a significant amount in the divorce settlement, and Mia was still struggling to hold down a job. They tried to make it work for a while, but about 6 months ago, Mia left him for a younger guy she met at a bar. Jake said he'd hit rock bottom. He lost his job due to poor performance, drank too much, and was now facing eviction from his apartment. He looked me in the eye and said, "I made the biggest mistake of my life. I threw away a wonderful marriage for a fling, and I'll regret it forever. I know I have no right to ask, but is there any way you could forgive me?" I sat there, stunned. Part of me wanted to laugh in his face and tell him to go to hell. But another part, a part I didn't quite understand, felt a twinge of pity. I told him I needed time to think and left the cafe in a daze. A week later, I got another unexpected call. This time, it was Mia. She was sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. When she finally calmed down, she told me her story. The guy she'd left Jake for turned out to be married. When his wife found out, he dumped Mia immediately. She was now unemployed, couch surfing at friends' places, and had hit her own rock bottom. Mia begged for my forgiveness. She said she'd been in therapy, realized how terribly she'd hurt me, and wanted a chance to make amends. She asked if there was any way I'd consider letting her stay in the guest house again, just until she could get back on her feet. I was reeling. In the span of 2 weeks, both my ex-husband and my estranged sister had come crawling back, asking for forgiveness and help. The rational part of my brain was screaming no. But there was a small voice, maybe my conscience, maybe just morbid curiosity, that made me hesitate. So here I am, Reddit. I'm sitting in my home office, looking out at the guest house where this whole mess started, trying to decide what to do. On one hand, these two people hurt me more deeply than I ever thought possible. They betrayed my trust, destroyed my marriage, and tore apart my family. The idea of having them back in my life, let alone on my property, seems insane. On the other hand, I can't help but think about the concept of forgiveness. Not for their sake, but for mine. I've done a lot of work on myself over the past few years, and I'd like to think I'm a stronger, more compassionate person now. Part of me wonders if helping them might be the final step in my own healing process. There's also the practical side to consider. The guest house has been empty for years, and I could use the rental income. I've toyed with the idea of listing it on Airbnb, but having long-term tenants would be less hassle. And if those tenants were Jake and Mia, I could set strict rules and boundaries. But am I crazy for even considering this? Am I setting myself up for more heartbreak? Or is this an opportunity for all of us to heal and move forward? I've thought about proposing a trial period. They could stay for 3 months, during which time they'd need to find jobs, attend therapy, both individual and group sessions with me, and abide by a strict set of rules. No alcohol on the property, no overnight guests, and they'd have to attend weekly family dinners where we discuss our progress and any issues that arise. Part of me thinks this could be a chance for real growth and reconciliation. Maybe we could rebuild our relationships and come out stronger on the other side. But another part of me fears I'm being a fool, setting myself up for more pain and betrayal. So, Reddit, what do you think? Am I insane for even considering this? Should I tell them both to take a hike and never contact me again? Or is there a way to navigate this situation that could lead to healing for all of us? Edit 1. Wow, I didn't expect this post to blow up like it has. Thank you all for your thoughtful responses and advice. I've read every comment, even if I haven't had time to reply to them all, and I'm overwhelmed by the support and different perspectives you've offered. To address some common questions and provide more context. 1. No, Jake and I never had children. We had decided early in our marriage to be child-free, which is part of why this betrayal felt even more personal. We had made this life choice together, and then he threw it all away. 2. My parents are still alive and were absolutely devastated by what happened. They've supported me throughout this ordeal but have struggled with how to handle Mia. They haven't cut her off completely, but their relationship is strained at best. 3. Many of you have asked about my financial situation. I'm doing well financially. The divorce settlement was fair, and my career has taken off in the past few years. I don't need Jake or Mia's money, which is part of why I'm even able to consider this crazy idea. 4. To those suggesting I might still have feelings for Jake, I can assure you that any romantic love I had for him died the day I found him with Mia. While I may still care about him on some level, 15 years together doesn't disappear overnight. I have zero interest in rekindling our relationship. 5. Several people have mentioned the possibility of this being a scam or them working together to take advantage of me. I hadn't considered this angle, and it's definitely something I'll keep in mind if I decide to move forward with any kind of arrangement. After reading through all your comments, I've decided to take a step back and really think this through. Many of you suggested that I might be rushing into a decision out of a misplaced sense of obligation or desire for closure. You're probably right. I've scheduled an appointment with my therapist for tomorrow to discuss this situation. I think it's important to explore my motivations and ensure I'm not setting myself up for more hurt. In the meantime, I've sent brief messages to both Jake and Mia, letting them know that I need more time to consider their requests, and that I'll be in touch when I've made a decision. I've also made it clear that, regardless of what I decide, there are no guarantees and any arrangement would be temporary and subject to strict conditions. Thank you all again for your input. I'll post another update once I've had more time to process everything and make a decision. Edit 2. It's been a week since my last update, and I wanted to fill you all in on what's happened. First of all, thank you again for all your advice and support. It's been invaluable in helping me navigate this situation. I had a long session with my therapist, and it was incredibly helpful. We dug deep into my motivations for even considering Jake and Mia's request. Through our discussion, I realized that part of me was clinging to the idea of fixing my family, of returning to the life I had before everything fell apart. My therapist helped me see that this wasn't healthy or realistic. We also talked about boundaries and self-care. She reminded me that it's okay to prioritize my own well-being and that forgiveness doesn't necessarily mean allowing people back into my life, especially if doing so could jeopardize the peace and stability I've worked so hard to achieve. After much soul-searching and several sleepless nights, I've made a decision. I'm not going to allow Jake or Mia to move into my guest house. Here's why. 1. Trust. While I've made progress in my healing journey, the truth is that I don't trust either of them. The idea of having them on my property, so close to my personal space, fills me with anxiety. I've worked hard to make my home a safe haven, and I'm not willing to compromise that. 2. Boundaries. Many of you pointed out that having them so close would make it difficult to maintain healthy boundaries. You were right. I realized that I'd constantly be worried about their comings and goings, who they were bringing over, and whether they were respecting my rules. 3. Emotional labor. The idea of weekly family dinners and group therapy sessions suddenly felt exhausting. I recognized that I was setting myself up to be their caretaker and emotional support, roles I'm not willing or ready to take on. 4. Moving forward versus looking back, this situation was forcing me to re-engage with a painful part of my past. I've made so much progress in building a new life for myself, and I don't want to risk derailing that progress. 5. Respect for myself. Ultimately, I realize that saying no to this request is an act of self-respect and self-love. 5 years ago, I didn't have the strength to stand up for myself. Now I do. Yesterday, I met with Jake and Mia separately to give them my decision. It wasn't easy, but I stood firm. I told them that while I appreciate their apologies and I'm glad they're working on themselves, I'm not in a position to help them in the way they've asked. I explained that I need to prioritize my own well-being and that having them so close would not be healthy for any of us. Jake took it relatively well. He seemed disappointed but said he understood. He thanked me for even considering it and said he hopes that someday we might be able to be friends. I told him that while that might be possible in the future, for now, I need space and time. Mia, on the other hand, didn't take it as well. She cried and pleaded, saying she had nowhere else to go. It was hard, but I stood my ground. I reminded her that she's an adult and that she needs to take responsibility for her own life. I did, however, give her some information on local job placement services and affordable housing options. I also told her that while I'm not ready for a close relationship, I'm open to occasional phone calls if she needs someone to talk to. As for the guest house, I've decided to go ahead with my original plan of turning it into an Airbnb. I'm actually excited about this project. It feels like a positive way to use the space and might even help me meet new people. I know this might not be the happy ending some of you were hoping for, but I feel at peace with my decision. It's not about punishment or holding grudges, it's about protecting the life and emotional well-being I've rebuilt. Thank you all again for your support and advice. This experience has reminded me of the importance of setting boundaries and prioritizing self-care. I'm looking forward to this next chapter of my life, focusing on my own growth and happiness. Edit 3. It's been 6 months since my last update, and a lot has happened. I thought you all might appreciate one final update on this saga. First, the guest house has been a successful Airbnb venture. It's been booked almost constantly, and I've enjoyed meeting people from all over the world. It's brought a new energy to my life that I didn't even realize I was missing. As for Jake and Mia, I've had limited contact with both of them, but there have been some developments. Jake took my decision surprisingly well. About a month after our last meeting, he sent me an email. He thanked me for being willing to meet with him and said that my refusal to let him stay actually gave him the kick he needed to get his life together. He's found a new job in a different city and is attending AA meetings regularly. He also mentioned that he's started seeing a therapist to work through his issues. While we're not friends, we're on cordial terms. He sends an occasional text to check in, which I respond to politely but briefly. Mia's situation has been more complicated. After our meeting, she went through a rough patch. She called me a few times, alternating between anger and pleading. I maintained my boundaries but did my best to be kind. I suggested she reach out to our parents for help, which she eventually did. To my surprise, our parents took a tough love approach. They offered to pay for 3 months of rehab. It turns out Mia had developed a drinking problem, but made it clear that any further help would be contingent on her completing the program and staying sober. It was a wake-up call for Mia. I'm happy to report that Mia completed the rehab program and has been sober for 4 months now. She's living with our parents temporarily and has a part-time job at a local bookstore. We've had a few careful, supervised visits, and while our relationship is still fragile, we're slowly rebuilding trust. As for me, I'm doing better than ever. My career continues to thrive, and I've even started dating someone new. It's early days, but he's kind, respectful, and understands my need for taking things slow. Most importantly, I feel confident in my ability to set and maintain healthy boundaries. Looking back, I'm so glad I didn't give in to the impulse to let Jake and Mia move in. It would have been a step backward for all of us. Instead, by maintaining my boundaries, I gave us all the space we needed to heal and grow independently. I've learned so much from this experience. 1. Forgiveness is possible without reconciliation. I've forgiven Jake and Mia for my own peace of mind, but that doesn't mean I need to have them in my daily life. 2. It's okay to prioritize your own well-being. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. 3. Healing takes time and often happens in unexpected ways. The Airbnb venture has been surprisingly therapeutic for me. 4. People can change, but it has to come from within. Jake and Mia needed to hit rock bottom before they could start rebuilding. 5. Support systems are crucial. I'm grateful for my friends, family, therapist, and even you, Reddit, for helping me through this. In conclusion, while the past few years have been challenging, I'm proud of how far I've come. I'm excited for the future and feel equipped to handle whatever life throws my way. Thank you all for being part of this journey with me.